Good evening and welcome back. My name's Matthew McLaughlin.
And I'm Daniel Sander.
And we have some notes for...
Snow White.
Yes, we do have some notes for Snow White.
Ladies and gents, we saw the premiere just for you.
So this job is... We have the privilege of going and seeing some movies. We did this so that we could keep up with movies and see more of them throughout the year. And that also comes with going and seeing some movies and spending our money so that you don't have to. Right off the bat, I'm going to say, don't waste your money and go see this. It was not worth ours. It is definitely not worth yours. Let's get into it. Let's start with the opening scene and the big controversy of the whole movie, which is that it's called Snow White, and they did not cast a white actress. How did they get around that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, to give you the details, she was born in a snowstorm. That's it. That's how they got the name Snow White, was because she was born during a snowstorm, and that's it. Elsa wasn't named that, but...
Well, and it would have not really been a problem had the color of her skin actually what factors into the story explicitly in the original story and in other interpretations. And so it felt so dumb. And the fact that we were talking about this a little bit earlier, that, you know, they changed her color to not be, you know, white and fair in this case, but they kept the hairdo.
Yeah.
Of all the things they wanted to fight for was the hair.
Yeah, give Ziegler the bob.
Yeah. They gave her like a mix between what, Lord Farquaad and like what's his face from Stranger Things.
Yeah, and leaning towards Lord Farquaad.
It was bad.
The hair was really bad.
The hair was bad. I'm like, so you stuck with the hair, but you know, skin had to go.
Right.
And so like,
there was this whole arc of defying the queen as well, but for some reason Snow White decided to keep the haircut that she was given. Is that not one of the best things that's utilized for female leads? Like, doing something with their hair to defy somebody else? Yet her hair was cut at a young age to this horrible bob, and she was like, even though I'm defying the queen, I'm just going to keep it like this.
Yeah. Even Will Byers in Stranger Things changed his hair eventually.
Yes.
It was just bad. Yeah, that was bad. Well, and like, I'd forgive the skin thing if it wasn't explicitly in every interpretation of Snow White. And this movie generally stuck to at least the Disney Snow White, which it was mentioned explicitly in there, and it was a plot point in there. Yeah, it felt, they're like, oh, we got to justify it. Mm-hmm. And they did, but it was dumb.
I think I'm going to disagree with you on them following the general Snow White. I counted on my watch, which is, as most of your viewers know, that's a knock against this movie. There was 13 minutes of actual Snow White in this Snow White movie. As far as when they were the actual beats of the original movie, there were only 13 minutes that actually were the actual story without it either diverting to a completely different meaning or just not following what it should have been the entire time.
That's fair. Not to be one to defend this movie, but the original Snow White was a little over an hour long in general, which speaks to the fact that this movie was entirely too long. But note taken. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, following it through, it felt entirely like two different movies. It felt like, oh, we need to make a Snow White movie, and we need to, you know, retain moments that people will recognize. So we'll bring in the working song, and we'll bring in the song in the mind, and we'll bring in the characters somewhat as they appeared in the original. And then we're also going to have this like diversion revolutionary story where there's this tragic thing that happened to her father and she's trying to be like him and you know, go out into the world, and then she experiences the world and all this. And it was just these two completely different movies.
Why were they trying to make Les Mis? Why were they trying to make this Les Mis? I haven't even seen Les Mis, and I know that that's what they were going for. Why were they trying to make Snow White into Les Mis? The musical, everything. Why were they doing that? It made no sense.
It's just, they didn't entirely pick a lane between not rebellious daughter, but like daughter finding her own and finding her own in the world and discovering who she is and secrets about her dad. They didn't really find the fine line between that and the actual story of Snow White, which I do want to put a disclaimer on this. Snow White has always been probably my least favorite Disney movie because I've always thought the story is dumb. And Snow White is a stupid character. She's annoying. I've always thought that. Her singing voice especially. But she's, in the original Disney movie, she's such a deadpan, forgettable, dumb character. She falls into moments that people save her from when she doesn't deserve it. And she's just kind of a ditz in the entirety of it. And I guess if there's one, glimmer of a thing I could pull from Rachel Zegler's performance in this, she was still really unlikable. Snow White was still really unlikable and not a good character at all. And so maybe it speaks more to the fact that the story of Snow White is just not a very good story, or it speaks to the fact that this movie was genuinely, trying to reinvent that story and just still did a horrible job.
Well, I think Ziegler did do a really bad job, and it was for one reason. It felt like 40 minutes into the movie, we finally got some sort of resemblance of Snow White, and that was when she was in the dwarf's house, and they were fighting, and it got messy and everything, and you gotta do the whistle while you work. That was the first moment that actually felt like Snow White, and Ziegler did not have the motherly characteristics that the original Snow White had. In the original Snow White, she's acting like a mother to these 254-year-old men, 74, whatever. Mm-hmm. And she has to teach them all, you got to clean up, you got to take care of each other, you have to wash the dishes and put them away. And they still did the whistle while you work, but she seemed more like a sister or something. She just didn't have the tact that the original character had. She just didn't have that.
I didn't think the original character had tact at all either.
Yeah, we could disagree on that for sure. Because I think that the original Snow White did have that. While she definitely wasn't like a super arcing character, she didn't have much of a character arc. She just kind of was Snow White and then fell in love towards the end. She definitely had some qualities that were very ladylike, that were very much of her time, showing, this is what you're supposed to be like. This is how you're going to lead people. This is what it means to be fair, That was all demonstrated by the way that she acted. And then in this movie, Ziegler's just kind of like, I don't know, modern girl boss who needs to read the back of her necklace to figure out what her life is. It just didn't jive at all. Her facial expressions during the whole movie, too, were just completely overacted. I think her acting was absolute garbage in this movie. I think that every single time there was some sort of emotion that needed to happen, whether it was happy, aha, this is happy, or sad, that's sad. She just went too far every single way, and she didn't have any touch that an actor's supposed to have. She did not embody a character at all. She just was Rachel Zegler, and that was it. I mean, we liked her in Songbirds and Snakes. And that was really good. I thought she acted very, very well in that movie. And here we are with Snow White, and she sucked. She was such a terrible actress in this whole movie. I gave it the benefit of the doubt when we went into this movie. Like, maybe things aren't as bad as they say. We all know the history of this movie, the production hell that it went through, the fact that it was delayed, the fact that they had to then change these real-life dwarves that weren't actual dwarves into CG dwarves that look really bad, and they then had to go through all those fiascos. This movie just didn't know what it wanted to be. It just made no sense the entire time.
Mm-hmm. Definitely felt like the Disney cash cow they were thinking it would be. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of wish. I actually do feel a little bit bad going into this movie knowing not anything about it necessarily, like as a movie is concerned, how it's made outside of just the troubled production. And I think that it's kind of unfortunate that we have a little bit of an inherent bias knowing the production hell that it went through the very vocal Rachel Zegler in all of the advertising campaigns, and her just slashing the original to ribbons, slashing everything that it stood for, and doing a huge disservice to the film in general. And hyping up this new and newly invented girl boss kind of story, which is fine.
Well, I don't think it's fine to replace a love Disney princess with a girl boss.
Not what she's saying is fine, but I think that if they're going to take a different direction, just take a different direction.
That's true.
And what we saw, I think we were not only a little predisposed to be biased towards wanting to hate it, and I was trying to curb it as much as humanly possible, but that... sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to formulate this, that it made for when we saw this movie as a marriage of these two things, where there was a semblance of, I wouldn't even say it was an original story, it's been done to death too, but the whole, her, leading up a revolution against the queen kind of thing, and basically what she did in Songbirds and Snakes and what she's done before, there was that married with just the original movie. And so part of what came out of that production hell was just this piece of whatever that wasn't unique. And when it was unique, the decisions were dumb and they didn't make any sense. And then when it was Snow White, the decisions were dumb and it didn't make any sense. And so you were left with this nothing burger at the end of the day, where it was 2 hours of your time from a movie that when it was first made in 1937 was 70 minutes or whatever it was. I don't know. It's just such a blah movie. Like, I don't know.
I would go much further than to say it was even blah. We were cracking up at how horrible everything was in the theater. Every single line of dialogue, every single plot with, he wasn't even a prince, whatever that guy was, Jonathan. Nothing worked at all. Let's dive into this. Let's dive into the CG and get that out of the way. My opinion, this was a CG fest, the likes we haven't seen since other Marvel movies. I hated the CGI. I really did. Specifically the dwarves. Everybody talks about how the Polar Express is the most uncanny valley movie ever. I've never understood it, but I also recognize that I grew up with that movie, so I probably just see those characters with some sort of life that I've put into them. Watching this movie, I think I understand how people see the characters in Polar Express as these lifeless, uncanny valley, just creepy things. I think I finally get it. The dwarves just were creepy. They didn't look good. Mm-hmm. Their voices didn't match. Their singing voices were low. Their talking voices were high. It flat out didn't work. So for me, the CGI was an absolute detriment. I thought it was horrible. Contrast that to Wicked, even, something that came out very recently. Well, sort of recently. And had a lot more set design, a lot better costumes. Oh my God. The costumes in Snow White were horrible. Wicked was so much better on all the facets of a musical, and Snow White just completely dropped the ball on every single category. So anyway, I was talking about CGI. What's your opinion?
Sure. I agree with the dwarves. With all the post-production hell and the fact that they were going to start with magical creatures, and then they moved to who even knows, and then they ended up with CG dwarves. Totally agree. They were uncanny as all can be. I think that the Polar Express comparison falls a little short only in the fact that at the very least the Polar Express was entirely CG, and that this one, it was this mixed match of both. And you start out the movie with a fairly compelling live musical number in a live set with real people, no CG, until she gets chased into the forest and then falls down this tree well thing, and then all of a sudden she is on she's on basically a green set with totally CG people. And it just drastically yo-yos between that, because then you have the fight scene with all of the guards and the people in the woods.
If you want to call it a fight scene.
Right, a tussle. And you had these large, fairly good set pieces. I mean, even the stupid Queen song, the song that was really bad, that Gal Gadot sang on the stairwell, that was a practical set with real people at the very least. And they kept cutting between that and the most uncanny dwarves ever. And then sometimes they would go from all that to a scene out in the forest that just was something out of Unreal Engine, that just was something in a video game that you just put a VR headset on and you're in this magical realm. And so there was that. So at the very least, like Wicked had going for it, that the majority of the movie was just very minimally CG. There were set extensions. There were, little CG characters like the animals and stuff. But in this one, it just was a slap in the face, it's physical, slap in the face, it's digital. To their credit, I thought that although the dwarves were uncanny and really hard to look at, and generally most of it was, I thought at least the fidelity was nice. I mean, to the credit of the motion capture team, especially with Dopey. We could talk about Dopey in his own character way. But in terms of his expressions, I thought he was compelling. And I thought that the general CG around him and the environments they were in were painterly and were pretty and were reminiscent of the original in that way. That they had, the animals had the Disney eyes and all of that too. And so, although there was too much CG, and although I'm sad that it wasn't even just, real dwarves or real people at all, just, actual actors, they were distracting, but I thought the CG was good, just not well used. So uncanny, but good CG, bad application.
Yeah.
End of the day.
I think that it was they forced a bunch of CG artists to have to come up with something to save their asses because there were dumb people at the corporate level. So the CG artists, good on you. You did good stuff, whatever, get paid. But man, this still looked bad. When we first saw the trailer, I remember thinking that opening shot of the cabin in the woods was very reminiscent of the original. I thought that it was. And then on the big screen, you nailed it. It looked like a freaking video game. It really did. It was just, okay, this is the cutscene before the next thing happens, before we're allowed to play again. It was, I'll stand by it. I think the CGI was bad. So there's the CGI. Let's move on to the real stuff, because you said that it kind of flip-flopped between them. Mm-hmm. I will say that the real stuff also sucked. I think that's where Wicked did good, because their practical sets, because their costumes were wild and they looked awesome and they really fit wherever they were. Wicked did a really good job on that. Here, do you remember it was the opening scene, if I remember correctly, where there's all the people walking through the village and they're all carrying pie, I think, or something like that? Tell me that wasn't just shot at Disneyland. Tell me that wasn't just people in Disneyland costumes walking down Main Street Disney with somebody with a red just pointing it at them. Tell me that's not what it looked like. That's exactly what it was.
You know, what's ironic is that I think that's actually a huge compliment, because the castle at Disneyland and all of Fantasyland is modeled after Snow White. And so that actually, while I agree that the general set design, like some of the forest scenes where they were like planting these really vibrant flowers in an existing hillside and they looked really out of place. You had some of the big set pieces and the dance sequences where you had like 30 people trying to fill a town square, and it just looked really sparse and really, the costumes were odd. I know that, the original Snow White's German essentially. And so trying to find that kind of costume influence wasn't there for this one. They had the bright colors and everything, and that was certainly a thing. Although I will say, I thought the square design and the castle design were pretty spot on. And that's because having been to Neuschwanstein Castle, the one that Snow White's castle was based off of in Austria, in Germany, it was, that castle, at the very least, it was perched on a hillside just like Neuschwanstein is, just like the one that was, modeled in Disneyland. And so the Disney side of me appreciates that. The film production side of me, I'm so-so. The cabin I thought was really cool. The dwarf's cabin I thought was cool, because most of that, maybe not in all sequences, was physical. When she walked into it, when the deer was like pushing her in and everything, and she was walking upstairs and she went to the bed.
Then, and you see all the carving of the owls and everything. Yeah. I will give them credit on the interior of the cabin. That was good. Yeah. As far as the castle goes, I think that we were joking about the whole intro. How when we grew up, Disney was this way. You have the blue screen with the white abstract castle, and it goes whoop, and it's over. You're into the movie. And here we are in 2025, and the intro to a Disney movie is its own movie showing off a castle. And while I agree, I think that the castle in Snow White looked really good. It really did. I can't fault it that much. It just didn't stand out, because we saw just as good of a CGI castle in the freaking intro for the studio that made the thing.
What do you mean by didn't stand out?
It didn't stand out because by comparison, we had already seen another castle that looked just as good. The CGI fidelity, care, love, attention to detail that went into the one in Snow White was probably 10x that much care, level, attention to detail as just the Disney intro. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I disagree, but I do. I guess that's not that big of a hill for me, but I thought just the design of the castle was fitting. They didn't have any like weird flying things around.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying
flying
is
sequences,
that
so I was good with that.
I wish that it was more of a simple intro so that you can let the movie breathe. Because I got to be honest, when we saw the castle, it was just like, hey, it's a Disney castle. Hey, there it is. And I got no other impact besides that, And it was because I think that we already saw a Disney castle in the intro, and we got a crazy look at it going around showing the 3D rendering and all this stuff. And then in the Snow White movie, it's about the same. We don't get really any more of the castle in the movie as we did in the intro. So
honestly, my biggest question when we first saw the castle was, how did a town that small get a castle that big? That was my first biggest question.
It's a great question.
Because it was this big old castle perched on this cliff, and then there were like 10 houses, it's speckled across the outside of it, and the castle had like 15 spires, and it was like 30 stories tall and very affluent and very royal and grand, and then there was just like village folks that looked.
Speaking of logistics, they keep talking about how go to the places where the good things grow, or the times when the good things grow. Where the hell is that? They didn't show any orchards. They didn't show any farmland. Like you're saying, there's this ginormous, amazing castle above them, and then there's like 3 houses in the town square. And then they talk about like picking cherries and all these other things. Why don't we see any of that? How come in the wide shots, it's just this, it's a fantastic wide shot too of the castle, where it was like these beautiful mountains and everything, but there are no farmlands that we can see. Why not show that? It's supposed to be a plot point in the movie towards the end.
Yeah. Well, and they sing an entire song at the beginning and the end about letting the good things grow.
Yes, and we don't see any of it.
Yeah.
It's just, okay, right
But hey-
outside the town is this horrible woods. You're going to die.
Rachel got a bunch of self-reflection songs, and the queen got a song, and the love interest guy got a song. Everyone got a song, so that's cool. We don't need to show anything that builds character or that builds
Nope.
emotion. We just get to give people songs and hope that the fact that they're singing does that.
Dopey almost got a song. Do you want to talk about that? He almost was
Okay.
really close.
All right,
if the
folks.
movie ran about 10 minutes longer.
Spoilers, the one non-speaking character in all of Snow White everything, he spoke.
Which is really uninclusive if you think about it.
It is.
This movie's all about inclusivity. We can't point out the skin color and everything. So taking the one mute character and making him talk, how does the mute community feel about this?
At the end of the day, I was kind of soul searching to be like, should Dopey have spoken? Did it help anything that he spoke? Did it help anything that he was mute? Dopey was arguably the most emotive character in this entire movie. And you know why? Because he couldn't speak.
Yep.
Was that a good lesson to have learned? Yes. Did they learn it? No. And so like I'm when he said his first words, there was this our row in the theater collectively groaned. And the rest of the theater was like, "Oh my gosh." And I'm like, "Really?" That you could tell that was one of the boxes they wanted to tick like early in pre-production. Like, we're going to have this whole arc between Snow White and Dopey. And honestly, to the credit of whatever the hell story was even present, and there was next to none, their moments were actually somewhat endearing and actually somewhat special in a way that the original certainly didn't do. He was a ham-fisted, or just a side relief character. He was a dope, exactly. And in this one, they tried to like delve into his meaning, which, fine, whatever.
Yeah, like you were saying, if we're going to give anything to them, there's that scene where Snow White goes out after Dopey was sad, after nobody was like paying attention to him. They all thought he was just stupid. And they have a little moment. And it was about all you needed.
Yeah.
It was like, okay.
Yeah.
It showed some about Snow White. She's
And it was
caring, and
different.
she's motherly.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that might be the only good thing.
Well, and then they had the whistling scene and everything, and that was a good tie-in. Because the
Actually,
original,
yeah.
they just start whistling for whistling's sake. But in this one, like, he's a slightly misunderstood character who's, who's piled on by the rest of the people in the house. And she relates to him in that way. And so, like, it's kind of a beautiful moment. And he emotes it so well. I mean, CG aside, I thought he was pretty well emotive. And, yeah, and then they're just like, well, shock value, he's talking now.
I hated that because it just took everything away from
Everything that was special and unique about
his
physical
whistling.
performance.
He doesn't have a voice, so he finally
She
has
gives him
something
his voice.
that everybody can enjoy, something that is his whistling, and he's
Yeah.
really good at it,
He is.
and everybody loves it. And then, oh no, he can just talk now. Okay,
Yeah,
so that
yeah.
whistling just kind of doesn't matter now.
It's it pushed it all to the side. So that's Dopey aside. He was definitely one of the better dwarf characters, just in terms of doing anything with anyone, like actually exploring something that's relatable or emotive, and then they just pushed it to the side with his speaking.
I so badly wish that it was just a regular dwarf actor that had that job, that had any of those jobs, because I think you're right. I really, really think you're right on this, that Dopey was the most expressive, therefore one of the best dwarves in there. But I just could not get past the uncanny valley.
Well,
I was just stuck on it every time I saw those ears. And I get that's what he actually
Right.
looks like. The character design was fine.
They didn't make him wiggle like they did in the cartoon.
That would have been funny. But yeah, it was just like I could not get past the fact that he's like
Yeah. I will say,
staring into my soul.
I was really trying, because there was nothing else going on in the movie, I was really trying to decide why the dwarves were uncanny in their scenes. And honestly, every time it was a close-up of their face, with other dwarves in it, with other backgrounds in it. It was fine. It was its own movie.
Almost. I got 1 point on that.
Fair enough. The minute they zoomed out and they brought them into the same realm as Snow White, or they brought them into the same realm as any other actor, you had these people with, I understand they're disproportionate. They're meant to be, and they're mythical creatures in this way. But their heads were ridiculous for their bodies. And at least with Dopey, unlike the rest of the dwarves, I mean, the rest of the dwarves were big nose, big head, big nose, smaller features. His was inverse, so he had more of a human face with big ears. And so at the very least, when it had close-ups of his face, regardless of the ears, he was much more human. He was much more clearly the actor. We looked up the actor who it was, and he looks pretty much the same. It was like almost 1-for-1 mocap. And performance capture. Sorry, James Cameron. And so the rest of them, though, it was just so hard to get past that. And, the fact that they even had to color code them in the movie so you yourself as an audience member could get past them and actually be like, oh, I guess that's Sleepy. Oh, I guess that's Grumpy. Oh, okay. And so, between Dopey and Doc were the only two that, you got anything from that was...
I like Doc.
Yeah, that was unique and that was fun and that had heart and that... because the dwarves in the original movie, they do have heart. They're the ones who come to the rescue of Snow White at the end of the movie. And in this one, they stand in a line and Dopey's now leading them, I guess, and he says words. And you're like, okay. And so at the end of the day, why were there dwarves? Did there need to be dwarves? Was this a movie about dwarves?
Right. I think the point that you're getting on
Just
is
fan service.
If you're going to remake something, you have to figure out, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Why? What is the
Disney won't learn
point?
that.
Exactly. You got to have a couple brainwaves first, besides just money.
Money.
So talking about the uncanny, it was a close-up on Grumpy. And basically, it was a close-up on him crying, which happened multiple times because whoever was the director was like, a grumpy guy
Grumpy's gonna be
crying.
sad.
That's got him.
He's misunderstood.
Oh, gosh. Anyway.
That's everyone in this movie. They're misunderstood.
It was the ratio. How small their shoulders were to how gigantic their heads were. I think it's Alice in Wonderland where there's a character who has a gigantic head.
It's the Queen of Hearts.
And she works in that because she's so crazy and weird and
you're in
everything.
Wonderland.
Yeah, and this version, they're still mythical creatures, but not how they designed them.
Yeah.
They made them act like humans. They made them look like humans. Everything was human except for the features.
See, that's a good point that the balloon heads were maybe the thing that sent it over because even in the cartoon, they're plump. They're rounded individuals with, gargantuan hats and beards and everything. And this one, they had this infant, not even, because babies are obviously very disproportionate too, but they're proportionate to their head for the most part.
Yeah, it was
and in this
literally
one,
scaled down. It was like they, especially Grumpy, I think is the worst offender of this.
Yeah.
Because he's a very lean dude, but he has a gigantic head.
That's
they
true.
took a male lean proportions, like some sort of athlete or something, and they just made his head gigantic.
Right.
So when you see the head to shoulder ratio in the close-ups, it's just like, whoa, what the heck, dude?
That's a fair assessment because I was trying to put my finger on it, and that's what I kind of came to, but then you put words to it. So yeah, that it's just the proportion head to body was off. And I'll not forgive, but I'll tolerate a lot of things in fantastical movies. I was thinking to even Chronicles of Narnia, where there's a lot of this style of stuff in it, where you have a lot of live action fighting, as well as a lot of full CG characters who are main characters who are disproportionate and weird. But they choose to make movies like that gritty first, if that makes sense, to where they have the gravity and they actually have the story first. And then they add in those characters as not necessarily supplementary characters, but they develop them into the story, as opposed to being like, okay, guys, sitting down, the guy who makes the writing room sessions and he does the fraud alert calls and he's always manic in his things. It's like, all right, guys, I want a movie. Give me a title. Snow. Okay. Black. No, not good enough, guys. And he does writer's room stuff sometimes for Disney movies. And it's hilarious because that's exactly how I see this, where it's a manic bunch of individuals who are like, guys, we got to make another banger. We got to do another okay, let's go back to the vault. Snow White. Is she white? No, she's this. And then are they real dwarves? No, they're magical creatures. Are they? And it's just this. Then the story comes. And then there's not one because it's a side effect.
Here's our checklist.
They've checked the boxes.
Make the movie fit.
Exactly. And that's exactly the problem here, was that you had two movies, one that was trying to drive the plot,
Yeah.
and one that was the fan service, one that was remember you're watching Snow White? And so at the end of the day, it felt a little bit like, what was the other movie I was thinking of? Did you see the Cinderella It was one of the very first live
Yes.
action ones.
Yeah.
And it was actually really good.
That one actually was kind of good,
Because it was
shockingly.
based in reality. And they didn't try to reinvent the wheel. They actually took a unique direction and a new style. Live action, as far as I'm aware, other than maybe the rats
think,
or the mice.
yeah.
And it felt, it wasn't exactly that. Or like, we'll even say like Maleficent, where they're like, okay, we know that we are redefining, we're telling the story of a new character under the guise of Sleeping Beauty. And so you have very specific stylistic choices in that where it's going to be dark and it's going to be, there's going to be gravity, there's going to be these new things going on. And in this one, it just was like there were literally moments, Miranda pointed out a couple times, where whistle while you work. Oh, I need to find my father. Oh my gosh, we're getting attacked by soldiers. And it just was totally bipolar. It was ridiculous. And like, what's sad was I thought the Snow White fan service scenes were fine. I actually liked the cleaning sequence because that was one of my least favorite ones in the original movie. And it was fun. I thought it was fun.
Cleaning sequence is the only thing that gets a pass. If it was just made by a group of theater kids
you go.
and some other people that like really enjoyed CG and they had made that, oh, this would be awesome. That would be so sick. The whistle while you work scene was actually wonderful.
I thought
was
it was
enjoying myself.
Well, and the moments that were like truly Snow White. I mean, I think that's really all Snow White, in my opinion, the original Snow White has going for it are the musical sequences, are the moments with the dwarves. Because like when you think back to it, the Prince Charming doesn't come in until like 50 minutes into the movie.
Right.
So there's no love scene. The evil queen is boss in that movie. She's super fun because she's psychotic. And then we'll get there, yeah. And then the dwarf sequences are just fun. Like there's a whole hand washing scene and bowl washing scene that they had to cut from the movie. And when you watch the deleted scene, it's awesome. It's just fun. And so I thought that it did retain some of that, but it was so juxtaposed to whatever the plot was they were trying to do, where she's like trying to be like her father, but also herself. And then there's a love interest who falls in love in the matter of the time it took you to use the restroom right in the middle of the movie. And so what the hell?
Yeah,
man?
it's true. I went, we were watching the movie and we know about this dude, Jonathan. And
He had a fun song.
yeah,
That was about it.
I need to go to the bathroom. I come back. It was like 2 minutes. It was like really quick. I want to get back to the movie. And all of a sudden they go from just being acquaintances to literally
They're
in
singing a
love.
love song when you came back.
And there's lights around them, like tangled. It's just like, I lean over like,
yeah.
so they fall in love.
Yeah.
Daniel's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the span it took you to get back from the bathroom. It was a minute and a half. Well, okay. So
stupid.
speaking of weird sequences, one of my least favorite sequences in the movie, which is sad because I thought there was so much potential with it, was the hi-ho sequence. Where
agreed.
they go to work.
Agreed.
You start out
have
with
a theory.
Doc.
Go.
Yeah, you start out with Doc beginning the hi-ho thing. And first of all, his singing voice didn't match his talking voice.
And
but-
just before it happens,
Yeah.
it was just like, we're doing this now.
Oh yeah,
It was
yeah,
just
we're
straight
in
up. It was
We're in
whiplash.
Yeah,
Anyway.
it went on to like a rabbit, and the rabbit was like, "Oh, there's people walking by," and then they walk by, and the whole thing was entirely a fan service sequence because, I mean, it's just meant to be a beautiful sequence in the original because in the original lyrics they actually say, "But we don't know what we're digging for. We dig, 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 dig." And in this one, they're trying to not only justify that, but then all of a sudden, so they're zooming through mine shafts for heaven knows what reason on a roller coaster. And the
It's a
song
3D movie.
it felt
from
very
2004.
It felt very Zemeckis. Yeah, it felt like we were following the freaking train ticket going around. Speaking of Polar Express, or actually, it felt a lot like Tintin. If you've ever seen Tintin, anyways.
Yeah.
And not in a good way. So they're zooming through this mine that's infinite and huge, and they're apparently the only people in there ever. And of course, they're all dopes and everything. And the song is reworked in such a way that they're kind of introducing each other over the course of the song, which I thought was clever, but it was poorly executed.
Really executed.
And then all of
Absolutely.
a sudden, they start going at the rock, and they like pick up their hands, and their hands start glowing, like Iron Man 3. And they're like, they touch the rock, and then all the crystals start growing. I'm like, what is happening right now? What even is this? And they did that, and the entire rest of the scene, I was so distracted by these like dwarf mineral superpowers that were never mentioned,
Ever.
that had no reason to exist at all. I mean, in the
Never.
original, they're shiny. The gems are shiny, and that's great. And we see the gems earlier in the movie, and they're shiny, and that's fine. But here they like glow their hands, and they touch the rocks, and the whole mine lights up. I'm like, what crack-headed Disney exec decided that was how that needed to work.
Daniel's not kidding. Their hands glow exactly like Iron Man 3.
Mm-hmm.
The bad guy in Iron Man 3, that is literally the same thing that happens.
Right.
But
Well, and I would give it any bit of grace in the way that this, obviously this movie in this universe has magic and a sorceress and all that. But like dwarves with glowing hands.
why?
Why? Exactly. Why? What did that add except for the value of they touch the rock and then all of a sudden it glows and they're like, ooh, if you see this on IMAX, people are going to they're just going to moan in delight. But like, what is this? Why?
It looked like the cave from Black Panther, by the way. I don't know if you caught on to that.
I didn't,
But the whole
but
thing
I could
looked
see it.
like where Black Panther was fighting. Like they're going to find some vibranium
That's
if
fair.
they dig far
it
enough.
was just the classic Hollywood endless gigantic CG scene.
Yeah.
When it's like it could have literally just been a hole in the wall like it was in the original, and it was pretty, and that's it. Our cartoonishly large diamonds and a bunch of oafs having fun in the mine. But no, we had a whatever that was.
Would you like to hear my theory?
Yes.
I believe that this movie was entirely designed. We know it's designed as a cash grab, but I believe that this entire movie was designed to fulfill people buying tickets to Disneyland and Disney World. The fact that all of the costumes looked more like people on downtown Disney, on Main Street, America, is that what it's called?
USA.
Main Street, USA. It looked like their costumes instead of movie costumes. And then specifically with the whole mine shaft scene, does that not speak like Disney's going to open up a ride called like the Seven Dwarves Mine Carts or something like that?
Well, they have one. Seven Dwarfs Mine Train.
There you go.
Congratulations. It's going to have even more record ridership. And it's a good ride. That's the thing that sucks. This movie was a disservice to it, if anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I don't want to ride it.
It just felt like they were trying to, because the parks are the most profitable part of the Disney Corporation. This felt like, hey, our 100th anniversary, we should do this thing. And while we're doing it, part of the checking boxes that you had, let's try to make it so that we can sell more girls' costumes.
Yeah.
That we can make a new ride. That we can do all these things to sell more, buy more. It just feels like Disney's becoming, by and large, even more.
Well, and at the end of the day, you're not wrong, actually. And that kind of is it. Because streaming services, they don't make money. And that we're coming to a point in our streaming service land where the market's so oversaturated that what was once relied upon to get new subscribers is now trying to keep subscribers. Hence why we're seeing so many streaming services with ads. Because that's the way that like Star Wars, for example, made its money back, was toys, costumes, and theme park rights, and all of that. And we're now in this weird dystopian landscape where it's very likely that, if we look back at this in 50 years, the next time Snow White's attempting to be remade, that people will realize that, Snow White was remade because Disney, in a way, was floundering. And they realize that these are very marketable brands that will now, we can revitalize these little girls' costumes, and we can bring in new side characters, which is why every movie has an annoying side character that's super brandable.
Did you notice the hedgehog?
Yes.
The hedgehog.
That had no reason to be there. He was
reason to
on the
be
book
there.
at the beginning and the end, and that was it.
Why?
Hedgehog.
When did this movie start development? Because there was
I
a
don't know,
time.
probably 6 or 7 years ago.
That's exactly what I was going to say. About
COVID,
6
probably.
or 7 years ago, there was a whole thing that happened where people were like, hedgehogs are the cutest thing. The same way that people went nuts for llamas.
And now
you know what I'm saying?
axolotls, too.
Exactly. People just pick an animal and it just becomes super trendy.
Very marketable.
I think that hedgehogs became very marketable and very cute right when this was starting development.
Yeah, probably.
So they were like, that's going to last.
Yeah.
We'll put the hedgehog
Well,
in it.
and you're right. I mean, your theory is, I think, entirely right, which speaks even more of a disservice to why the movie should exist in the first place. And I mean, I get it from a business perspective. Do I agree with it from a creative perspective? Absolutely not. I think that even if you would have written a compelling story and made a not even completely different, but like take your own spin on Snow White, make something different.
On that
that you
topic,
still could have marketed all of this just fine.
I thought that the mine scene was actually going to tie into the evil stepmother. I really, really did.
In what way?
She was all about diamonds.
Oh, that's true.
She had set it up.
Yeah, they
She was
never tied her-
I know. They talked about
the
how
wealth of the
Snow
city
White,
to the
yeah.
mines
She
or
talked
anything?
about how Snow White was a rose, fading, fleeting, gonna wilt, whereas she was a diamond, hard, lasting forever. My people want diamonds. Then we see all these
Crates of diamonds.
We see them mining diamonds like crazy. I figured that they were going to tie that in somehow,
Well,
and
or
I was actually
if they
kind
would have
of
enslaved the
excited for
dwarves
that.
or something, like had they had captured the dwarves and forced them into do something dark. Do something edgy and different. I mean, they did the classic Disney kill a parent, and then they did the classic Disney, pretty much everything. Like all the tropes were checked off. Some of them in more satisfying ways than others. But yeah, they should have done something with that. There was definitely something there.
What was Ziegler's I Want song?
Which one?
What was it? This is actually a genuine question. All Disney princesses have an I Want song. Something that they want, something that they desire that connects with people watching.
It was the one
movie.
she sang in the courtyard, right?
And what was it?
It was she wanted to be like her dad. She wanted to be fair. She wanted to be, she wanted the people to be basically wanted the kingdom to be like it was.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Then how come
She took like 18 years to come to that conclusion.
Yeah, and kept the same hairstyle that, was a symbol of her basically giving up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Potato Guy says, "Hey, be better." And she's like, "Okay.
I'm on it.
I'll do it."
And then she mopes the whole movie about trying to be better. And that's, yeah.
I need to lead a revolution about my father, who some people know are dead, but most people don't.
Yeah. And then she can suddenly know how to ride a horse and suddenly know how to be somewhat tactical in a fighting situation.
That's a great point. She was locked behind those gates for forever. She literally says to Jonathan, "What's it like out there?" And then halfway
She
through
just
the movie,
becomes-
she's a badass leader, and she's riding a horse and all these
She just
different
becomes
things.
freaking Katniss. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What
I know.
was this
totally
movie,
bipolar.
dude?
And so it's the kind of thing that they took so much time implementing their own little personal songs and the own little old Snow White gaggy things. And they took a 70-minute movie originally from a story that's like 10 pages long. That's a tiny little, moral story from ancient Germany, and then made it ballooned it into a 2-hour movie and still didn't tell a story. There's the end of the thing where you're like, oh, it's the same kind of Disney. Remember this? Oh, remember this? Oh, you remember how he whistles? Oh, yeah. The diamonds in his eyes? Yeah, we did that too. And then proceeded to just bloat it to this unreasonable, unruly story. You know what, though? I am curious on your thoughts on the music, though. So I would love to touch on the music because this was the same songwriting duo as Greatest Showman and La La Land. And so I am interested to hear what you think about the music.
So that's why it sounded so standard. So I love Greatest Showman. I really do. I haven't seen La La Land, so I can't really compare. But I really actually love Greatest Showman. I think that it is the best musical that has come out, best original musical that has come out, I think, in my lifetime, maybe. I'll have to double check things, but I hold it in that high regard. I'll listen to the music. I think it's very fun. I really enjoy it. If there's a theater that happens to be playing it, we'll go see Greatest Showman. I really enjoy it. God, the music in this had no place. None of it made sense. Why did everybody get a song? Why did everybody have to sing about nothing? You could literally just feel it. The pacing of everything. It was like, there's a song coming on. It's just like...
It's like when they slid their contract across the table to Disney, like, we got to do like 25.
We have to do 25.
I don't care where they fit. There's got to be like 25.
There's only 17 characters. 25.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. We're going to have some of them sing twice. Sorry, guys. That's how it's going to go.
I hated the music. None of it pulled me in. It was all distracting. It didn't add anything to the movie. The music sucked. Again, Whistle While You Work was actually good. That is the one scene that gets a pass. That scene was fun. And guess what? It happens to be the one that they changed the least. That's why it gets a pass. They did the old thing and it worked. They did the timeless thing and it worked. And everything new was garbage. I sound like Grumpy.
See, I agree. The music as a whole was pretty bad. I would give credit to maybe 3-ish songs. One of which I think Whistle While You Work was fun, and it was a fun redoing of the original in a way that wasn't totally different, but that was new and fresh. Hi-Ho tried to be different. It failed miserably. But I liked that they were trying to introduce the characters in that. I thought it was a smart thing to do, but they did it poorly.
Right.
And I liked the opening sequence song because it was an original song that jived fairly well, and it actually it set you up for the land you were in and the relationship she had with her parents, and then the fighting like morals she has. And at the very least, I thought those were fine. Everything else, and I usually have a pretty good tolerance for musicals. I tend to enjoy musicals. There were just too many songs. And they were all so bad. Like there was the love song that you came in halfway through. And over the course of that entire thing, while they were goo-gooing at each other, I was listening to the kid behind me raise and lower his chair several times because of how bored he was. And I kind of took a look around. So many people just out of it, just disassociated.
Glazed over.
And you're like, your songs are meant to be the propulsion to the next plot beat, or the catalyst for, or the explanation for.
At even bare minimum is showing a feeling
Right.
that can't be explained unless you say
Right.
it.
And so like even giving it a little bit of leeway with the original Snow White, there are very few songs in that one that actually accelerate any plot. But at the very end of the day, the original Snow White doesn't really have a plot. But in this one, like clearly no lessons were learned, and they just peppered in so many songs that they bloated the runtime of this movie. And none of the songs did anything. And when they tried to, it was so bad. Like the Queen song was really bad. The old Queen song was really bad. The love songs were really bad.
I was down with Gal Gadot until she started singing.
Yeah.
And I think actually she did a great job. I'll
come back at that.
She did a great job literally until the singing. I think that she pulled off the look that they were going for. I think that she held this respect that she was given. She was acting very good until the singing started. And then from that point on, except for the transformation scene, she was terrible. She wasn't threatening. She wasn't scary to me. It didn't seem like she had any power. She would she made that diamond dagger at the end. And then it like went away.
Yeah, she
but
just
then
felt like a
didn't
magician.
do anything.
Yeah.
It literally did nothing. Every single action did nothing in this movie. It was just like watching this movie felt like running on a treadmill.
Yeah. It had the usual like PG syndrome of modern movies where you think of watch like a movie like Anastasia from the mid 90s that I think is also PG. And there's a whole sequence where like Rasputin like raises dead people from the ground and there's a lot of threat and it's scary and it has gravity to it. And then you watch this one and she's like, it's sort of like in Wish or whatever too, where there's the whole like misunderstood sequence. And lady, kill someone. Lady, threaten somebody.
We just keep hearing that you're bad and we see nothing.
Yeah. You're like, I'm bad because I'm bad. Because at least the original Queen, she's like, she's this cackling, conniving kind of person. And I was thinking about this a lot. I saw on social yesterday on Instagram, Gal Gadot went to Disneyland to promote this. And she went up with one of the evil Queen actresses that are there and did some classic line. I don't remember which one it was. The evil Queen there was so good. Like the evil queens are known for being like sassy and really, crazy at the Disney parks. And it's because they're basing their performances off of the cartoon. They are over the top and they're insane. And it's amazing because when you watch the evil queen do it against Gal Gadot, she's horrible. And then I watched the movie and I'm like, she's like 10% of what she should be in terms of the crazy scale. She looked the part. I couldn't get past the fact that she couldn't nail down just a non-accent.
That's a good point.
Her accent came out all the time, and I won't necessarily fault her with that. I honestly think they should have just maybe kept her accent, frankly.
Yeah, go for it. This is a mythical land. If you're going to get away with giant heads on little unproportionate
just
bodies,
keep Gal Gadot's accent.
let her sound Israeli. Go for it.
Right,
Who cares?
exactly. And so like, she comes in as an outsider, so who cares? She's not like blood or anything. And
point.
so she was constantly trying to mask her accent, and it came out so many times that she's not just having like the straight kind of Americanized accent. And then when she was the evil queen or the old lady, the old hag, she didn't even like lower her voice. She didn't cackle. She had prosthetics on that looked really odd. She didn't ham it up. She didn't act like an old hag that was really crazy and like a loon. I think her and Zegler both were just so flat and they were so unoriginal.
Yeah, she did a good job of the lead in. So I guess she could probably play a good queen. But as soon as she had to start singing and do the bad stuff,
and then the singing was horrible.
Yeah. The only thing that I think was good after the singing was the transformation scene. I'm not going to say that she was good at the door.
Transformation was different.
I thought it was pretty cool. I really did. The fact that she like pulled her hair out while singing, and then the first thing I noticed was like, oh, her fingernails are short. Did they miss that detail? But then when she holds it up, they grow, and it's like, oh.
Except for when she like gets on the boat and like.
She's still singing. She's all athletic.
Like on an Italian like catamaran or whatever they're called. And,
gondola,
Gondola, yeah. Just like singing her way out of this cave, and you're like, what is happening?
That was stupid.
Yeah,
that was so stupid.
There was some really stupid blocking in this movie. There was. Like just the general direction I thought was pretty bad. But that being said, I think the director Mark Webb, he directed Madam Web. I think.
That would make so
Because
much
I remember
sense.
the last name parallel. I'm pretty sure he directed Madam Web.
I am shocked we didn't see an ambulance kill somebody then.
She was off catching spiders in Peru, whatever the line
Whatever
is.
it was.
Oh, wait, hang on. Wait, so what did he directed a Spider-Man movie? Was it Andrew Garfield Spider-Man? Oh,
I never saw those ones.
they're okay. Okay, no, for some reason his name was familiar with a Spiderweb. I could have sworn it was Madam Web, but maybe it wasn't. So he directed the Amazing Spider-Man movies, which kind of stunk of the same type of stuff on
They're
this.
the worst out of the
Good.
3 options.
Yeah.
4 now with
Yeah.
Into the Spider-Verse.
That's true. Yeah. Anyways, that's a total aside, but I felt like the direction was pretty poor.
I agree.
I think Gal Gadot was an exec producer on this one, and you could tell that she cast herself because she wanted to play the part, and fine, but she was not right for it. Rachel Zegler was trying to put all of my bias for her as a person
Same.
aside. Because we loved her in Songbirds and Snakes. She was great.
Really
and
did,
that was in the height
genuinely.
of the bad PR for this movie.
Yep.
And then you see her in this movie, and she had the like perpetual underbite singing and very sad eyes and the horrible haircut, and just the emotion of like a brick wall. She just didn't move. She didn't emote. And then she'd yo-yo between I'm singing now, and then I'm sad and angsty because my dad's dead. That was it. And then people had to rally behind that. Good job, Rachel. Nice work.
It was...
So sorry to get back a little on track here. So we talked about music, we talked about CG,
Talked about costumes,
costumes.
which I still think were absolutely horrible.
They certainly were odd.
They weren't movie costumes. They would be great in person.
They were Disney
I
park
legitimately was sitting there and I was like, if this was a Disney park ad, I would be thrilled. That looks like
Yeah.
fun. But since it was a movie, it was just
Well,
what
so
was
I guess the thing that I tried to zoom out to focus on was what if I was watching this movie without my knowledge of every other movie like this over the course of history? Because the unfortunate thing is the princess, queen, man in shining armor trope is like the biggest story trope in all stories. And that, the fact that Snow White came out in 1937, there's a lot of movies that have happened between then that have kind of soured us to that trope. And so I'm like, if I were to put on my first time viewing of this particular story glasses, would it still be good? I came to the conclusion of no. But thinking about movies that have like parodied it to death, like Enchanted and stuff like that, where you have them poking fun at every little thing of it, should be informative enough to this movie on what not to do and where to take it differently so a modern audience can relate to it. Because at the end of the day, I think that's why we were checking our watches and why a movie like this really only needed, for other reasons, needed to be 60 minutes when it was originally made. But now, like, why does it need to justify 2 hours? And I was waiting for a full CG fight scene at the end, honestly, with like battles and all that kind of shit. But at the end of the day, like trying to put on those glasses and being like, was this a good movie? Irregardless of all the tropes I know and have been done to absolute death, no. There were so many decisions made in this movie that blew the cadence of the movie and the consistency of the movie, and so few characters that meant anything. And that at the end of the day, I wouldn't watch this again. I've seen it once. I am good wiping it from my mind and moving along with my life.
I am too. Also, talking about movies that parody stuff, we can't talk about that without mentioning Shrek. Especially because
That's
we've
true.
mentioned how this movie, Snow White, failed because she had to try to be a girl boss. Let's rewind. Shrek, 2001. Fiona is a boss, just straight up. We find out why. It's because she had to deal with living in a castle and fending for herself and all this other stuff. There's reasons why she's good at these things.
They flip it completely on its head.
They flip
which
it
is
on
great.
its head, but there's still actually a love story, a genuine, moving love story, which is crazy. It's an ogre trying to... Anyway, they even say that in the movie. And then here we are, 2025, and you have a rehash where, yep, the princess needs to be a girl boss because...
Yeah.
And there's no reason why she is. We have a huge time of off-screen time that passes where she just decides to not be. She just sticks behind the gates and does nothing.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, she just is, and it also doesn't work. Nothing jives at all.
No, they definitely had a different story to try. And even the different story of the, trying to be like her father and save the kingdom is so hashed out in every way, shape, and form that they were at least trying for something different. But like, some of the other remakes that come to mind are like Aladdin tried to do a similar thing with Jasmine, where honestly at the end of the movie, they tried to focus on her so much, the movie should have just been called Jasmine because Aladdin was the most forgettable character in the movie.
In the live action? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so you think about that or think about Jungle Book or you think about some of the ones that have actually been daring enough to step out of the framework to an extent and do something with the source material that's different. And this one felt like it had one foot in one door and one foot in the other. It's like, well, we got to be a Snow White movie and we got to show the dwarf stuff, even though like even at the end of the day, they don't really do anything or help anything with her.
They don't.
But we also got to give her this love story. And then this whole thing where she's looking up to her father and trying to save the kingdom. And it just was so split down the middle that it's no wonder that like critics reviews from everything I've seen have been so back and forth, To just pick a lane. You got a foot in both doors. Pick a door. Either be daring or don't.
Yep.
Make it a shot for shot or don't.
You want to know the best example? You just reminded me of this. It was how the dwarves had no part in the movie. Mm-hmm. The best example of this movie being reshot and recut was the whole sequence when they're going to get the castle. And the dwarves, you see them recreate the lantern with their shadows on the wall.
Yeah.
You see them take a crossbow and everything. And you're thinking they're going to do something to get the castle taken over. They're going to overrun the guards or be creative or maybe they're really strong, whatever.
Yep.
And then literally nothing happens. Yeah. Literally nothing
They could have
happens.
just gone through the front gate just like Rachel Zegler.
Exactly. They could have gone through the front gate. The guards literally just give up.
Yep. And they just stand on the inside of the castle courtyard in a line.
They're like,
cross
we
their arms.
did it. They have swords in their hands. They
You're
have
like,
crossbows.
So what deleted scene did we miss? Did they like do a Home Alone takeover? Like, what did they do?
Right.
That would have been cool. I don't know.
So I don't know if you noticed, but there was part of the big controversy with this movie was the fact that there were those mythical creatures. Yeah. They kept them in the movie. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah,
You saw the
it was
picture,
the
right?
gang of the rest of the guys.
It was Jonathan's gang.
Yep.
And I think they had to do that because maybe the actors needed something, like they had to have screen time.
I don't know.
So that they might have
contractual things or something.
things. But that makes me think that ending scene where there is the actual one real dwarf who shoots the thing and says this stuff
Might have been
one of the original cuts.
That's a good point.
I think that might have been one of the original cuts. Because they probably took over the castle and had some weird fight scenes that, now that I'm thinking about, that would have sucked. But if it was the actual
It wouldn't have been
dwarves,
any better, but it would have made more sense.
Yeah, at least something would have happened.
Yeah, and it would have been a different take. So
Nothing happened. The crowd just decided to rally behind her. They didn't know that was Snow White. This random girl put a crown on her head, and then everybody was like, "Oh, that's the princess!"
It's the cry. Let's do it.
Yeah.
It's like Long Lost Princess. Just like Tangled. Yeah.
You want to know the irony too?
Yeah.
Don't mean to harp on race again, but if she had been Snow White, then when
Instantly
she walked
recognizable.
up in that red outfit and everything, she could have been recognizable instantly.
Yeah.
She could have been.
But hey, she caught a snowflake with her finger.
That was so stupid.
Wait, was that at the end or was that earlier?
That was right before they go to
That was
the
right
castle.
before that. Yeah.
One snowflake.
Yeah, it's like freaking Forrest Gump, like a feather flies by, and she's like, snowflake.
It's like the middle
Like,
of
is she going to
summer,
meet
too.
Elsa? Is this going to be like the crossover we didn't know we wanted? Pop. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you notice Tinkerbell?
Yeah, you'd asked me about that. I didn't
could've
notice that it
swore.
looked like Tinkerbell, but the fact that he was chasing like a firefly fairy thing was interesting.
Tinkerbell on Dopey's nose. Why?
Money.
Why was Tinkerbell in this? That's Peter
Merchandising.
Pan. What the heck are you doing?
I don't know. Conglomerate things.
I mean, seriously, it's like they're still stuck. That's actually a great point. This shows the development hell that this went through started back when Marvel was just falling out of grace. This started when the MCU and all of the multiverse crap was starting to disintegrate. So the developers still thought that would work. That's probably why they had the snowflake that looked like Elsa's stuff. That's why they put Tinkerbell in it. That's why all of these different things. And it just sucked. It added nothing. It took away a bunch.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, and so at the very end of the movie, I looked up the budget. You have a guess?
Okay, so it ballooned. I was thinking the original was probably 180 is my original guess. Ballooning costs. Oh, would that be included in that? I don't know. I would guess.
So even just from what you saw, just irregardless
Oh, God.
of development hell, from what you saw on screen, how much do you think the movie cost?
I think they wasted $250 million.
You're pretty close. I think it was 205.
Oh, okay.
Either way, the fact that a remake movie, I mean, usually original movies, usually like sequels are more expensive than the main thing. But yeah, that's a Marvel movie. That's essentially like Spider-Man No Way Home or whatever. That's a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, was there plenty of spectacle when there was spectacle? Sure, fine, whatever.
What executives
need to be?
think what executives think spectacle
Yeah.
was on screen.
Yep.
What actually is spectacle wasn't on
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Oh, you know what we did? Speaking of on screen, cinematography and just general look. You had talked about the uncanny valley of the CG elements and the fact that the rest was particularly not interesting, I think is what you said. But cinematography, how was it shot?
The fact that we keep identifying this as Marvel-like, I think is extremely telling of how bad the cinematography was. I genuinely only have one shot that I can remember as being actually good, and I think it was 100% CGI. That one shot is just them walking across the log, and they're backlit, so it's just the dwarf silhouette.
Classic, yeah.
And that was great because that was a great little reminiscing thing. You know, that shot was great, and then literally everything else just was lame or weird or didn't fit. Like there was, if we're talking about cinematography, the first opening scene, the number one reason why I keep calling it as if they shot it at a Disney park was because you went from this wide angle, low f-stop, you know, you could see most of the faces in depth and everything. And it was just classic
Hollywood dance sequence.
classic Hollywood dance sequence. It's like a musical. It fit. And then all of a sudden, you cut to her walking towards, and it's this handheld, shaky, low shot walking backwards. And it just completely didn't fit. It literally pulled me out. I was like, wait a second. We're all wide and smooth, and we're enjoying the dance sequence, and then shaky.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That made no sense. And
Yeah.
the rest of the movie felt like that too.
Well, and it was the CG stuff was hyper stylized and hyper colorized. And so like when they were having their, I guess she was dead and they were in the forest and everyone was around her. It was this like golden hour times 10, crank up the saturation, stylized piece with, you know, her lying on a green screen in the middle of it all. And then you get to like some of the courtyard stuff. Like I think particularly about the final sequence where they're on the drawbridge. And I know that they're supposed to be pale in comparison to her. She's supposed to outstand in the color red, and you have the guards and everything coming in a more black thing. But the rest of the movie, and especially the live action sequences, and even the last sequence where they're all dancing in white, is so bland in comparison to the ultra colorized, ultra stylized CG segments that when I think about this just as like pictures and colors, at the end of the day, I can distinctly like put blocks to this was a full CG scene because they didn't even try to blend it with the rest of it. And this is a full, you know, even the fight scene that they had in the middle of the movie, the whole thing felt like it was just on this really ugly set. And the way that it was shot was not particularly interesting. Wasn't an interesting scene to begin with. But then when you juxtapose that to the dancing sequences in the cabin and stuff, you've got the camera flying around Zemeckis style, and you've got all this crazy stuff that it's just so like A unit was doing something different from B unit from C unit. Like it was all, they were just shooting different movies at the end of the day. And so it just was so blasé. But the one thing I did notice that I liked were the Dutch angles on the Queen. There were a couple times where she was coming down the stairs or she was going into the castle like on the railing. And there was a really severe Dutch angle. And the only reason I liked it is because they were committing to a style. I wouldn't say it was a good style. I wouldn't say that it fit anywhere in the movie. And it wasn't like, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was so obnoxious. There were like 4 of them, so maybe it was a little obnoxious. But it was a style. They committed. They did something different. They did something unique and something that generally conveys bad guy.
Right, and I would argue that they didn't commit. I think that the cameraman who was holding it and that day that they shot that scene, yeah, they committed, and more likely they probably wanted to do it multiple times. But the fact that they didn't do that really the rest of the movie, like
right.
when she
they didn't commit in any other way. But
yeah, exactly. So the fact that, I think that they got the one shot, and to me, I was just like, as soon as I saw that crazy Dutch angle, I rolled pretty hardcore on the first one. I literally was like, oh my God, they have to make her look evil. They're going to do a Dutch angle. Woo. Stop singing. Make her evil. Don't do a freaking Dutch angle because you couldn't think of anything else. So that was my opinion on it. I agree. If they had done that and then when she was transforming, committed to that crazy Dutch angle again, and they show it, it's like her thing, then that's committing to a style. But I think the fact that they didn't, was very disappointing. Because I see what you're saying, that they committed hardcore to that actual shot. But I just wish they would have done it more. If they're going to commit, freaking commit. You got to go all the way, man.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So what else we got that we can dunk on? I don't know. I feel like Walt's probably rolling in his grave a little bit because it was just, I don't know. It was just such a forgettable movie. It was for Disney Plus movie.
It should have been straight to Disney Plus.
Yeah.
This movie and the people who made it and the actress Rachel Ziegler in particular made a huge deal about how race is perceived and all these different things. And the entire movie is like that until the final scene where everyone's dressed in white because she's the queen. I don't get that. There's been this whole problem of everybody being problem with like hiring a white actress, and then at the end everybody's dressed in white. I don't know. It doesn't jive. Even that they didn't commit to. Mm-hmm. It's just like, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It didn't mean anything either. It's like she's there and they're all throwing white stuff in the air, and he's dressed in white and she's dressed in white and the whole town's dressed in white. And
see, I thought it was the funny part. I guess we haven't mentioned this one yet. Where I noticed that the most was when they were going and smearing Snow White across the ether and bashing the original. They're like, yeah, well, she gets into a situation where a guy has to come and save her. And, you know, both her and Gal Gadot were saying like, no, this is a very women central movie, women led. I'm like, great, that's awesome. But then we watched it and it wasn't. There was still a love interest. He still had to come and save her. And then what was really funny was they had their little love scene where they're not that, but loves, you know, where they're going to kiss and all that. And, they have this little like exchange where she's like, yeah, if I ever died or like fell asleep, like, I don't even remember what she said, but she's like, yeah,
if you have to
wake me from my sleep, you can do it or whatever. And like both Miranda and Matt was sitting in the middle. We both leaned in and we were just like foreshadowing, where it was like, okay, well, there's the consent part. That was the big hot button issue for Snow White. You're like, yep, let's check off. Oh, she gave consent. We're good for the kiss now.
Yeah,
we're greenlit.
Can't imply the romance and make it okay that way.
It's that kind of stuff that just is so, why? I mean, okay, fine. And it wasn't subtle at all. It was just so funny where she like leaned in and she's
forced.
like, you can kiss me if I'm asleep, like, or like, would you kiss me if I'm asleep or whatever. You're just like, all right, consent.
Yeah, women say that.
Checked.
Women absolutely say that all the time. Yeah. If I ever fall asleep, you can wake me.
Would you still love me if I was a worm? Like, that's what it felt like. Like the writer was just like, okay, so we've been tasked by Disney to add consent to the storyline. And they're like, okay, how are we going to do this? Well, they're going to get deep into each other's eyes and they're going to be like, would you, or you're allowed to kiss me if I'm asleep.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what? Let's go back to the number one point of movie making in general. Yeah. Show, don't tell. Show,
kiss him
don't
early.
Tell. It doesn't have to be, it's just, what did it say in the book, in this actual movie? The book literally said, was it love's first kiss or true love's kiss?
Yeah,
so it doesn't mean it has to be the first one.
Well,
let them kiss before.
Exactly. Just be like, okay, the romance part, I mean, it was weak, but fine, do that. And then they can build the romance and maybe they kiss then and then, you know, they're making out in front of the dwarves and all that and whatever. Fine. There's your consent. I don't know.
Yeah, make him don't tell, love her so much
that she wants to be in his arms and all that. Exactly.
That he has to kiss her because the love of his life is gone. Yeah. That's what he's perceiving, and that's what brings her back. That's where the tragedy lies.
Yeah.
And because there is none of that,
it just was funny. At the end of the day, it just was funny, and you're just like, oh, here's your consent.
Here's the consent. One of those
foreshadowing. Yeah,
check the boxes.
Exactly.
Yep.
So
make it look like Disneyland. Add the consent, force it in there,
right.
Ironically.
Girl boss stuff, ironically still trying to be like her father.
Yeah.
Dead parent. So there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when all the deer came in, I'm like, hey, that looks like Bambi's dad. Is he going to get shot?
I want to talk about
Bambi's mom.
I want to talk about the animals.
Okay.
Cute as they were.
Disney eyes.
Wrong style. I think that I don't know why Disney doesn't learn lessons. Probably because they didn't have the budget to go back and fix the animals too. It's true. Lion King remake, everybody agreed they were way too lifeless. Mufasa comes out, and we agreed in our podcast on that they pretty much nailed the style. They were just expressive enough, and they had all that to where they looked really good. And then here we are, you know, a year later or whatever, and the animals now just kind of look creepy to me. The deer didn't look that cute. It was
It's a
just
tricky
like,
line to toe because at least in the original, she has songs with the animals. Like in the Wishing Well song, there's birds chirping along with her and singing in harmony
well, no,
and all
it's
that.
interesting because it's just the eyes.
Right,
As
no, I
far
know.
as the movement and everything, I thought that they were actually pretty
Right.
well done.
They were pretty
The
hyper-realistic.
animation
Yeah.
was pretty good. But the eyes,
Yeah.
the fact that they were
The
like
ultra
that,
huge eyes.
and the hedgehog is like, that wasn't too bad, but still, you know.
Well,
it's
and
just
that's what I mean by it being tricky because if we go back to the Cinderella example, the mice in that movie were just mice. They didn't talk, they didn't
right.
emote, and honestly, it worked because then when you have all the fantastical things happening, it's under more of a serious lens, and the movie retains its gravity. And in this one, it yo-yos between that because you have all the crazy animals and when she fell into the forest, the man-eating tree and whatever. Then she fell into a river that was under the thing. And
Amazing lighting. It was so bright.
yeah,
in
and
the
then it was
river.
daytime, all of it. Yeah, it was a weird sequence. Anyways, then the animals come in, and you're like, okay, here's where they're picking it. And yeah, you've got like chipmunks that are hyper realistic, and you've got all of this stuff. And sure, they can act in their animated fashion or whatever. But yeah, the deer in particular were weird. They had the freaking princess eyes, the massive saucer
It
eyes,
was like,
against everybody else. Yeah.
what's that show that used to be on Cartoon? Powerpuff Girls. It was like Powerpuff Girl
yeah,
eyes.
they were big. They were big.
Boom.
Yeah.
Gigantic.
It was weird. There were so many moments throughout the whole movie that were like that, where there just was a very distinct line between lanes, where it was super CG and super animated, superhuman, live action, super not. And, between the story doing it and the visuals doing it and the songs doing it and just the pacing in general, yeah, it was definitely a hellish limbo of a movie that should have stayed in development hell.
And I think that is the number one note, is that Disney, you should have killed it when you had the chance.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you figured out that this movie was going to be garbage, you should have committed and killed it.
Yeah, let your audience tell you we don't want this, which they did. And just let the classic be the one classic. Don't touch the OG, even though I didn't like it very much. It's just leave it,
Just leave it.
So shall we do some ratings?
Yes, right now we're going to cut and we're going to go to ratings and we'll be back like that. All right, so let's go through these categories. Every single week we give a score out of 5. We have 6 different categories: uniqueness, cinematography, story, execution, immersion, and emotional connection. Daniel, let's kick it off with uniqueness.
Uniqueness. Okay. I gave it a 1 out of 5. It wasn't neither of the two stories they tried to tell, whether it was the Snow White side of things or the father be like my father kingdom thing, were unique. The fact that they tried to add a little bit of a story to Snow White is the only reason I gave it a 1, because in all fairness, Snow White hardly has a story to begin with, and that they tried to be somewhat daring. They failed miserably, but they tried in some tiny fashion in a 1 out of 5 kind of scale. So that is my uniqueness score. Matthew, what would you give it for uniqueness?
0.
All right.
Not a unique movie at all. It's literally a worse retelling of a movie that's been beloved for close to 100 years now. They did tropes that are not unique at all. They did modern political moves that are not unique. The cinematography wasn't unique. The storyline wasn't unique.
Those are different things.
I know. I'm just trying to
You're just
rub it
piling
in.
it
Just
on.
trying to rub it in. None of this was unique at all. Even the freaking music, man. It was the most standardized musical music. The I don't even know what you call it. The dancing for the musical numbers was the most generic, modern interpretation of musical dancing out there.
It's like when they hire Lynn to just be like, Lynn, this is a horrible movie. Lin-Manuel
Yes.
Miranda.
Oh,
They're like, this is a horrible movie. Add some of your magic to it, and then it still sucks.
Yeah, thanks,
Like
Hamilton.
Little Mermaid.
You ruined it all. So uniqueness is 0.
I'll disagree with you a little on the music. I didn't think all the music was garbage, but I thought most of it was. Okay, well, so then, hey, cinematography, what you got?
Cinematography. The highest score that I'm giving any category is 1.5.
Okay, what's your reasoning?
It gets all of those points from the whistle while you work scene and the single shot of them walking across the log. I thought that the whistle while you work was fun. I actually enjoyed it. I really did. Like I mentioned, if it was somebody else who made it and it was its own thing, it would be sweet. I would enjoy watching it.
Fun little short.
Yeah, fun little short. Literally everything else was absolutely trash. And I don't mean to say that the cinematographers did a bad job. It was just that the direction, how things fit, the choices of the cutting with different looks, Nothing jived, nothing
No
was
cohesion.
cohesive.
Yeah.
So only 1.5.
Okay. Cinematography for me was even lower. I gave it a 0.5. It was a mess. The CG stuff, I suppose, on its own could be kind of pretty. Like there were moments where like they were the Fireflies and they were having their little romance scene, but I was so distracted by the pretty garbage storyline that was happening. The problem was like you're filming a turd. And so at the end of the day, I mean, you can make filming a turd really pretty. They didn't even do that right. So, yeah, 0.5. It had all the usual Disney live action movie tropes in their most horrible fashion. There wasn't even a single shot outside of the Dutch angle that was attempted that was even really unique or interesting. So, yeah, 0.5.
On to story.
Story. In the same vein as uniqueness, I gave story at least a 1 because I think they're starting on a shaky foundation with Snow White not having a story to begin with. And the fact that they tried to embellish on it, and at least in the opening sequence, they set up their parameters. I will give them that much grace. Was there a generally unified story across the whole movie? Hell no. Was it a good story? Hell no. Was there a semblance of a story? It wasn't a compilation of images. I will give it that. Was it much more than that? No. So 1.
Nice.
What you got?
0.
Amazing.
Characters really change, I guess, technically, but why? The reasons?
Physically, she put on a crown.
Whoa, that's
And she got a
crazy.
tapestry, but she didn't change her hair.
That's crazy, dude. That's wild.
She made some friends.
I guess so. So, yeah, the story was basically non-existent.
That's fair.
0.
That's fair. All right, execution.
0.5.
All right, what did they execute well? Very little.
One shot walking across the tree. They did that. That's handy.
What,
And
shot-for-shot remake of what was executed well in
yeah,
37?
you know what was funny about that was that I was thinking exactly what happened. I was like, "That's a pretty shot." And then as soon as it was off screen, I was like, "You know why? Because we can't see the characters. It's their silhouettes."
Yeah, yeah.
So they
Now it's just a
executed-
painting we're making with
Yeah.
non-uncanny characters.
About 24 frames is 1 second long. About
Mm-hmm.
24 frames looked good, so they get 0.5 on execution.
Amazing. Well, you're giving them more grace than I would. I thought the whole thing was just horribly executed. I thought that there was very little in this movie that was executed well, if executed at all. That they had commitment issues on either side between making it a shot-for-shot remake and making it its own movie. That all the acting pretty much across the board, outside of maybe the few moments with Dopey, was pretty bad. Generally,
Dopey, Doc had a couple that were fun. But
Yep.
yeah.
Doc and Dopey were emotive in the very little scenes that they needed, but other than that, nobody really grew. Nobody really changed. There was nobody that was really threatening, evil, pretty to look at, or even just remotely entertaining. And there were lots of watch checks. So I think it was pretty horribly executed.
And what was your score?
0.
0.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
All right, immersion.
Immersion, another 0.5.
All right.
I was not immersed. We were laughing. I guess this probably goes more towards execution, or actually, no, at this point it's actually for a later thing, so I'll wait on that. But immersion, I was pulled out of it. I was paying attention to the kids behind us that were pointing out funny things about the movie, and they were hilarious. One of the best parts about this movie, we all agreed, was there was a dude sitting in front of us who was coughing, and his timing was hilarious.
Quietest moments, choking on spit. Yeah.
So immersion, as you could tell, me focusing on somebody who is coughing was more entertaining than the movie. Immersion,
Maybe your movie sucks. Yeah.
0.5. It
All
was
right.
terrible.
Once again, you gave more grace than I would have. I gave immersion a 0. I was bored, dude. And I was even trying to put on like my little kid lens of, I mean, I'm not a believer that Disney movies are just for little kids. I think that was
Agreed.
one thing that made the brand so good, is that it really was a family movie. This didn't have that. It wasn't the bright colors of like Cocomelon or something, but even as a kid, this would have been boring. This was such a boring movie. And as an adult, even trying to put on my filmmaker lens and appreciate the technical things going on and try to focus on something that didn't make me so bored, I was bored. I was really bored. I was bored. The movie sucked. 0.
Very much. Emotional connection.
Yeah. It was, I didn't give a crap about anyone in the movie. Dopey for a little while, and then he spoke, and he lost all of my connection.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
0 on emotional connection. What I was going to say a couple points ago was that we got our emotion in the form of laughter. But it was at the laughter at how bad this was.
It's a great comedy.
Which means you can't give points to it for any emotion because the only emotion we got was laughter at their expense because it was so bad.
I was trying to think there were maybe 2 moments in the movie where we genuinely laughed because it was funny. I'm trying to remember what those were.
For me, I think 2 of them were Doc, and it was because they brought dying Jonathan who just got shot in the shoulder.
Oh, yeah. And he's like, I'm not that kind of doctor.
Not that kind of doctor. And he goes into how he's like a geologist or whatever, and he's using terms like... That was pretty funny, not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah, beyond that, though, you're totally right. There was nobody to even remotely be connected with. Like, they were talking about how so many of these characters, particularly Dopey and the angry one. Grumpy, thank you. Were misunderstood in some way. And, like, they attempted to throw that in. But Snow White never got that anywhere. The love interest guy... never changed. He just was all of a sudden, Flynn Rider, but neutered. And then he became kind of a swoony love interest that was still neutered. The Queen never adapted. She got old and then she died. Her death was cool. She smashed the mirror and her vanity killed her. I thought that was cool. Sorry, this is a total...
How did she die in the original?
She got crushed by a rock in her old age because the dwarves pushed a rock on her.
Okay. Okay.
It was brutal. It was during a rainstorm and everything, and a barrel, like a boulder, falls on her.
This is one where we disagree, and I'm not going to defend my point that hard. I think that's a better death, only because it just made more sense. When I was watching
more deserving death.
Yeah. When I was watching it, I was like, wait a second, what? How did that kill her? And then all of a sudden, it's this shadow realm behind the mirror, and I was like, what are the implications of that?
Well, at the very least, the boulder death brings the dwarves back to some sort of relevancy to the story, is that they help her take down the evil queen. But to this movie's credit, it was a visually interesting scene, and something that you could at least put a little bit of meaning to be like, well, her vanity was literally what killed her. And so, unlike the other movie where they just crush her with a rock, this one there was actually a little bit of meaning. I will give it that much credit to the Queen's death and her demise. Her character design was decent too. But anyways, we're not go back into that too much. I will give one weird little note, sorry, right here at the end. I thought the design of the magic mirror was weird. He felt a lot like Shrek. Like, he was overly cartoony. I thought they should have made him way darker. Like, made him some sort of this apparition type thing. But they just literally, like, even the cartoon, he was more interesting looking. But this was like full-fledged bad CGI Shrek magic mirror.
Which is funny, because in Shrek it totally worked, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But I agree, there was something off. And then the voice actor, while sounding cool, also couldn't pick the range. In the beginning, it was that perfect bassy, kind of grumbly. And then towards the end, he just got totally like a growl down low.
I'm curious if he's... I mean, obviously the original voice actor isn't alive, but there's the one that does a lot of stuff for the parks for that character, because he reoccurs in Fantasmic and a lot of park shows. And so I'm kind of curious if they pulled him and he just has a slightly different cadence for this.
Yeah,
could have been bad direction.
It was literally just that it changed throughout the movie. I wasn't angry at it being super dark or super low at the end or the less low at the beginning. It was just that it wasn't consistent.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a mirror who gets summoned. It should be consistent.
I just couldn't get over his design. But that's just
I agree. It was strange.
He was oddly plastic. But anyways, that's a side note. So at the end of the day, what was your average? Our averages were the same.
Our averages were the same. So the math on this one is really simple. We'll divide it by 2. So... I forgot the name of it.
Snow White. Snow White and the forgettable magical
Snow White and the forgettable movie.
Creatures.
So, Snow White, we have given you some notes, and your total score out of 5 is 0.416, repeating. You get a half star, I guess because something ended up on screen.
It existed.
It existed.
Which I think in Letterboxd you can't give a 0 star. So it got the bare minimum to exist as a rating in Letterboxd.
It got the bare minimum.
And I think the only other movie I've ever rated this low in Letterboxd was Avatar, The Last Airbender, the Shyamalan one.
Which was absolutely garbage.
Dog shit. It was so bad. So yeah, congratulations, Snow White, on Razzying it up. We'll see you at that ceremony.
Yep.
Rachel Zegler, Best Actress for the Razzie.
I guess you guys are going for a sweep this year. So thank you guys so much for watching this podcast. If you stuck all the way through, please subscribe. It would help us out a lot. If you have a movie that you're interested in us reviewing, go ahead and put that in the comments down below. And go to Letterboxd. We are OTW Video on Letterboxd. Follow us. You can see all the reviews for all the other movies that we have watched.
And before you sign off, one quick little thing. This is definitely, it might be a hotter take as movies are concerned, because this one has actually been fairly half and half on its release. And so we got a lot of really good engagement for our Wicked episode. So if you have thoughts, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'd love to hear kind of what your response is to this. We went and saw it on its premiere. We were one of the only fully grown males in there. We were happy to have Miranda with us, so we didn't look weird. But we went and saw it at the premiere for y'all. So let us know what you think, and let us know what we should do next for sure.
Yes, and one other note, I forgot about this as well. To the commenter last week on Mickey 17, nice job spotting the 3D
Printing spool, yeah.
Yeah, good job, Tristan. Appreciate you.
Yes. We didn't have an apple this time.
It's
so,
true, we didn't have an apple, so we figured a rose.
Yeah, which I don't ever remember a rose even being in the original, so I don't know why a rose
Some
was
weird
here.
comparison. It's more Beauty and the Beast, but
I
whatever.
can give the villagers vanity and you'll wilt like a rose. And you're like, evil queen, what are you smoking?
Yep.
Anyways, we
Yep.
digress. Thanks for coming along.
Yep. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.